inflation per represented property. There is no mathematic solution whatever to inflation and deflation. And this question escalated through the Paul campaign at that time, but never precipitated, although promises were made that my work would be watched and evaluated and was very much appreciated. It never precipitated any further communication. So I'm hoping to establish some kind of communication with some monetary authorities within the Paul campaign who can evaluate and bash a solution about, with the interest, of course, of saving us from not only from monetary failure, but from all the injustices which are imposed by the present obfuscation of our currency.
Well, sir, since we do have such a high influx of calls, we unfortunately can't discuss policy over the phone. If you'd like to get the information to us, you're certainly welcome to email the campaign, and I can give you that address if you'd like.
But here's the thing here. We're not actually asking this woman to participate in further dialogue about this at all. I've simply apprised the candidate of an issue so that it could be escalated if it deserved consideration. So what she's doing is dodging the issue here, and of course the Paul campaign is dodging the issue in its entirety. Notice the difference. The Bachman campaign is willing to hear out a proposition, whereas the Paul campaign has just cast a deaf ear once again to the most important things for us to resolve if we are ever going to achieve solution, as Mr. Paul only pretends. All right, give me that address and I'll give it a shot for the sake of formality at least.
All right, it's info, I-N-F-O, at ronpaul2012.com.
All right. Okay. I'll send that with the return receipt requested. Do you respond with by affirming return receipt requested email?
I'm not sure if I'm not the staffer who handles that email.
Well, of course,
address,
I'd like to prove at least that the Paul campaign has received such a communication, because otherwise, they just go on as if we knew no better,
Well, we do look at every email that comes into that account, sir, so I can assure you someone will see it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
Now, I've been doing this for 43 years, and that makes me no spring chicken at this. And all I interpret from this, in any reasonable way at least, is that this is just evasion. Intended evasion. Mr. Paul speaks in slogans. He's not a teacher of true economics. His slogans are not accountable to the people. He's an Austrian economist, an advocate of banking, an advocate of interest, a pretender of a claim to an author friend who's stolen just a trivial part of a vital whole idea, and that part not even going so far as to deliver us any useful meaning whatsoever, insofar as would serve us to resolve our issues. In other words, Griffin is pretending himself, years after the fact, to have discovered that the banking system doesn't give up anything in value in falsifying debts to itself. Well, I'm sorry, but it's entirely pretentious to exalt that as a discovery, while many people have for 30 years tried to put Mr. Paul and myself together, and while his friend has only stolen from my work in such an obvious way that from the dating, we know that Griffin didn't discover this. And of course, why is he going to visit my pages? But that, an obvious article, several of them actually, which invalidate his attempts to invalidate my work, which he's proving he's a plagiarist because he doesn't even cite it explicitly, which he would do if he weren't, excuse me, an intellectual coward. So he's trying to prove that he's developed these ideas, and in truth, if you were to waste $5 on his preposterous, latest edition of The Creature from Jekyll Island, which he stole from Eustace Mullins, you'd only discover that his best argument is to dismiss, without qualifying, but to state that the proportions of gold to circulation don't even matter. In the end, he just proposes that the only substance by which we could determine solution or problem or rectitude, whatever he might claim even, he simply voids it all and says that the only things that matters don't even matter. He just says so. So this is what kind of a presidential candidate we have in Ron Paul. And of course, I've already sent the email that, many, many times over, which this woman has just promised would be read. Well, it's not going to be read by anyone who really, truly gives a damn. It's going to be read by someone who is so exuberant that ending the Fed by removing the sign or destroying the building or whatever, but leaving the obfuscation of the currency, which is responsible for all the effects around us, is what's going to do us justice and what justifies supporting Ron Paul. So this is just wrong, wrong, wrong. Now, in the end then, what does all this mean? We have 43 years in which I've proposed mathematically perfected economy to virtually every conducive candidate, possibly conducive candidate. Many questionable candidates were, approached on this. And in many cases, the idea naturally escalated to the very top levels of whatever the campaign. But what's wrong here then? We can put our fingers on many things. Number one, the principal candidates on every side of every aisle of every country are funded by the purported financial system, which, as obfuscators of the currency, of course, are the most omnipotent financial, I want to put that word in quotes every time I say it, because it's not just financial, it's an obfuscation which dispossesses us. But these people have usurped representation to put themselves in a position which takes so much from us that he can readily afford to waste vast sums of money which exceed us on such candidates. And what, after all, is Ron Paul in all this? But, a deception of the kind which actually, in purporting to end what he only claims by dogma, is a problem, and yet in advocating a persistence in the very problem, which is the obfuscation of the currency, he's actually, as an advocate of ending it, he's only a false advocate of ending. He's actually an advocate of persisting in banking and usury and so forth. So if he were a credible candidate, he'd be calling me now, and he's not. He'd have been calling me 4 years ago in 2008 when his campaign promised that they'd, read my web pages with great enthusiasm and would be watching them carefully, and please keep supporting Mr. Paul. Well, they didn't uphold their part of the bargain. And they're not about to uphold their part of the bargain, because ending the Fed is not preserving the only thing that it comprises, which is not just private banks, but an obfuscation of our currency for the sake of what amounts to inevitably terminal dispossession. The worst thing that could happen to a free country or truly free markets, which are not truly free under such exploitation, which dedicates ever more of the circulation to servicing an ever-escalating sum of falsified debt, as opposed to sustaining the industry and commerce, which are falsely obligated to do so. So what Paul is advocating is not truly free markets. He just claims to be advocating free markets. What he's advocating is not free enterprise. What he's advocating is not truly ending the Federal Reserve System. What he's advocating is preserving it. So, in truth, what you have is you have a field of candidates which are either totally inept or indisposed to address the problem and to resolve it, or you have false candidates such as Dennis Kucinich or Ron Paul who only pretend to be opposed to it in ways which in the end instead preserve it. So you have no viable alternative for the people. There is no way for us to prevail in solution of our own affairs, except by understanding the issues ourselves, to the extent that we unite over our mandate for mathematically perfected economy and absolute consensual representation. Thus, as the people, we assert ourselves and our right to self-government, dictating that mathematically perfected economy will be our only economy, or the respective purported governments are null and void. The only solution to all this is to eradicate the obfuscation and its effects, which is, in this transition to mathematically perfected economy that I prescribed, comprises an eradication of interest and an obligatory schedule of payment, by which we refinance all prior debts, counting all prior payments of interest instead toward principal, which not only eradicates or solves, as we've already paid many times over, all prior debt, but which puts us, if there's any remaining principal at all to be paid, approximately across the world, in general, 12 times ahead on our payments. Everyone's immediately out of foreclosure. All debts are restructured to what they ought to be, which in general is a zero balance. And in the cases where we haven't paid off the entirety of principal, in a sum of principal and interest